There we go. Okay. Give everyone a second to return to what's going on here. Okay, let's get started. Session 2 today of this People Power Conference is about engaging staff. And like Iona already alluded, I think the previous session did a really good kind of introduction into what engaging staff is really about. But we're here to now talk a little bit more in depth about how to turn feedback into real change. And I am so happy that joining me, Imanta, today on the Adureo side are our friends from the TED-Rag Trust, Lisa Thomas and Jen Rimming. Lisa, can you give us a quick hello and an introduction to your role? And then Jen as well, just so we know that everything's working and we can hear and see you.
Absolutely. I'm Lisa Thomas. I'm Director of People at the TED-Rag Trust. We are a trust of 18 schools across Devon, serving 2,500 staff. So we're predominantly secondary schools. We are a big trust, and we love our partnership with Adureo.
Great. And Jen?
Morning. I'm Jen Rimming. I am head teacher of Marine Academy Secondary, one of the secondaries in the TED-Rag Trust.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'm especially excited that both of you are joining us today because we'll be talking about not only how we're bringing staff feedback to action, but how we should work together as a system of listening to our staff, and really emphasizing the role that a head teacher plays and the trust leader plays, and how we have to kind of really map out how does listening and acting work across the trust, across our organization. And equally exciting is that the TED-Rag Trust won quite a few of our this year's Listening and Acting Awards. So this team is very primed to share their stories with you today. 6 TED-Rag schools won 8 Adureo Listening and Acting Awards for staff, pupil, and parent voice. And Jen was one of the staff feedback award winners. So I think we'll have a lot to talk about today, and let's get to it. The reason why we're talking about listening and bringing feedback into action, honestly, this isn't something that is new for Adureo. We've been talking about bringing feedback to action and the importance of that for quite a long time. But we did understand that we needed a bit broader approach to what it means to use feedback across the organization. And so this past year, we launched a new listening framework, which hopefully a colleague will share in the chat. You can read more about. And this listening framework is meant to be both as a self-reflection tool for leaders to think about their listening practices and mindsets, but it's also just a way to think about how you are listening beyond surveys in your organization, because surveys are one data point and one way that you can listen to your staff and your pupils and parents. But there are many, many other ways that you can do this. Claire already mentioning the staff forums and things similarly to that. So our framework works with key parts. We have the listening practices and the listening mindsets. And we really believe that we have to do both to listen well and to listen in an embedded way across the organization. The practices are kind of the steps you need to take, the process that you need to have in place to do this well. And the listening mindsets, on the other hand, are the intentions that leaders kind of embody for themselves, and the deep reflection that is going on as we prepare and arrive to listen to our stakeholders. The 4 listening practices are voice, understanding, action, and communication. Voice being, how are we collecting voice? How are we hearing from our people? Making sure that we are asking ourselves, do we have all the right voices at this table that we need to understand the topic, the theme that we're trying to uncover a little bit more. Then we go to understanding, which is that key element of not just taking the feedback that you've listened to at face value, but diving into it through triangulation, correlation of trends, looking at the different patterns across different groups, across different schools, really understand what is beneath that feedback that you've heard and what could be maybe the underlying really root issues that are at play. And then we get to action, which is, of course, the main topic of today's session. Feedback without action is feedback lost. And feedback lost is a very high risk of eroding the trust across your culture. So we really have to be mindful about how we are bringing people along to say, this is what's happening, and this is why it's happening. We can do that in two key ways. We can do that in those short, quick actions, quick wins that we can prioritize and show our staff that we are acting on what they said. And we have to be really transparent about how we're bringing them along the way for those more strategic long-term implementations where they need to be a part of that, building that change. And then we get to the practice of communication, which is how we are closing the loop for our stakeholders, how we are making sure that we are transparent along the way. And this communication is kind of that glue that holds the processes together. We have to bring people along on this journey with us. We have to make sure that communication is active in the process of gaining voice, collecting that voice, in creating that understanding, doing that together with our staff so that they are around the table to help us understand more, like Claire mentioned in the previous session about those staff forums to follow up on what we heard, and then bringing them along through communication for that action so that they know how are things progressing and how we're getting there. And on the other side, we have the mindsets. And this is how, as leaders, people are showing up with an open heart, an open mind, and an open will to take and give space to their staff, to listen, to take the time, to give them that time and space to hear them in a deep way. And those listening mindsets are about openness and empathy, really emphasizing that human connection that we're facilitating here. Responsiveness, inclusiveness, and at the end of the day, the psychological safety of our culture. And all of these things are how we are modeling the listening culture for our staff, how they are modeling that listening culture for the parent community and the pupil community. And we have to do these together, because if we're only going through the motions, only through the practices, but we don't have those intentions there, things are going to fall a little flat. It will feel a bit transactional. It will feel a bit like a tick box exercise. On the other hand, if we have the best intentions in mind, but we don't have the clear processes to go through, people will have a lot of excitement, but they may feel deflated when things aren't seen through in the way that they had hoped, and they'll feel a little bit lost and confused. So these two elements, the listening practices and the listening mindsets, are really core when we're thinking about how we're bringing feedback to action, because we do have to see that whole cycle through. And we have to really reflect as leaders, what are the intentions and the mindsets that we're bringing to the table, and how we can develop that for our organizations. And I'm now going to share some of the data that we see across England, because it's a really interesting story when we look at different staff groups. And we know that we're giving a voice. People are using surveys, people are using different ways of collecting that feedback. But it's not hitting home in the same way that it may for all staff groups. What's really, really exciting is that all staff, or the majority of staff, really feel respected. And I think this is a testament of those listening mindsets, that we are creating cultures in our schools and in our trusts where people feel that community, people feel that sense of belonging and feel respected. And that's something to be very celebrated. Staff, for the most part, also feel pretty comfortable talking about their work-related concerns to their leadership. But we're now seeing a little bit of a change, a rift building. Senior leadership feeling the most positive, and then other staff groups a little bit behind that. And so what does that mean? We have that psychological safety in place to voice our work-related concerns to the leadership. That's a great first start. That means those conversations are happening and people are being brought around the table to be listened to. However, staff, other than senior leadership, are not that confident that leadership understand their professional challenges. And this is where that rift between senior leadership and other staff groups starts to grow, with teachers being the least positive. So what do we have to think about here? That means they are being asked and staff feel comfortable sharing their concerns, but there isn't that clear link with that confidence that they understand that those professional challenges. And I think that's a really important trigger to remind ourselves of those poor listening practices, that maybe we're not doing everything we can to really close those loops and see how we need to follow up and follow through. And then finally, staff are not seeing the impact of their feedback to the leadership. Senior leadership, 80% of senior leaders say they see feedback having an impact always or often. However, teachers are the lowest of all staff groups. Only 29% say the same. And this is not a gap about intent. People have the right intentions. People have the right mindsets. We are building those cultures of listening for communities. But this is structural, and we do have to remember that the closer you sit to decision making, the more visible that connection between your voice and what happens next is going to be. And so we, as trust leaders, have to start thinking about how you can close that gap. How are you building those listening systems to make listening more visible and to be more responsive at all levels of your organization? And this requires moving away from the models that prioritize control and compliance. We have to move away from that ecosystem to that ecosystem of an organization, where we're recognizing that human experience, the relationships that are at play, and that we are really leaning with the meaning of what people are saying as the central point to drive improvement. And so in this context, listening becomes that core design principle. We use listening as that driver for improvement. And we're building an organization that is connected to its lived reality of its staff, that is surfacing what matters in a timely way. So we're being very reactive, and we're getting good information in a quick way. And we are building resilient organizations that are able to test the changes of time, which I think, as some people have said, change is now the norm, not the exception, and we have to build our organizations to be resilient to those changes. And so one of the most important things trust leaders can do is not only, of course, listen more themselves to their staff, but build the conditions for school leaders to listen better, because school leaders are really that linchpin in this process, in this system, and this requires attention to three things: capability, agency, and I've put permission in brackets there because I think agency is kind of the end goal where we want to see it be, but sometimes we do have to have conversations of permission, and protection for school leaders to be able to do this well. So capability is about training school leaders to listen. I like to say that listening is not a skill. As much as we say that, yes, that person's a great listener, or, oh, that person's not so great of a listener, I really do believe that these are skills that we can train in ourselves, from just upskilling on survey analysis or on feedback facilitation strategies, but also how we're training ourselves in those mindsets to protect ourselves when it comes to listening to the hard stuff. Agency is about how we are looking at the blockers across the system and giving school leaders genuine authority to act on what they hear. If there is too much centralization, if there are too many blockers, too many checks to be checked before anything can change, leaders are going to stop listening to those things because they'll know all the work that's going to be had. So really having that candid discussion about what it is that school leaders can do. Of course, that doesn't mean we're not talking to one another anymore, but that there is that open agency discussion had. And finally, protection for school leaders. Creating a culture where school leaders can share difficult findings without fear up to the trust with their own teams, and that they know that they are supported through maybe data that does not look as shining and bright as they would have wished, because this is a journey and we have to help them along the way. And so what does that look like? I really want to emphasize that middle group, those school leaders in the middle, because they are both the key listener and the key conduit moving information up and down across an organization. And it's very important that they know how important that role is. And so they're not filtering out difficult voices or difficult information to avoid having more difficult conversations going up. And they are really critical in how they filter information down to the rest of their staff so that people know what's going on when. And we're building that psychological safety for that center group to work well with their trust leaders and to build that culture for their staff. And that's an equally critical group to remember about, because just like school leaders need to have capability, agency, and protection, we have to have that same set of criteria and reflection for our middle leaders and staff in the school. How is that listening going to run in the school itself? So being able to act on feedback within their sphere of influence of a single staff member, thinking about where they can act and how they can make improvements on feedback that they hear. Being sure that they are surfacing feedback up to senior leadership that can be then fed up to trust leadership. And really modeling those mindsets of listening in their everyday work, because they are the relational workers. They are the ones working with pupils. So a strong listening culture modeled to pupils will then create pupils that are good listeners. And the same goes for how we're working with parents. There are some things, of course, we have to watch out for. And as we are working through how does this listening system work, we have to watch out for being too performative or transactional. And so the antidote to that is to treat engagement as that strategic tool. Every bit of feedback is a gift, and every time that we receive feedback, we have to honor that gift and to follow through and be responsive with that information that we've given. We have to be watching out for feedback going into the black hole. It is very easy for all that data that you see after a survey to kind of just overwhelm and to sit on your desktop, literal or digital. So making sure that we are acting, closing the loop, passing information up and down. Data by itself isn't going to create change. It's people working with data who will. So getting that data into the hands of the right people. Really thinking about what are the current structural chokeholds and centralization at play in your organization. And you can kind of reflect on that by mapping out and removing organizational barriers, having those candid conversations between the trust central team and your school leaders about what agency they have and what they can do with the feedback that they hear. And then, of course, watching out for any lack of psychological safety. And this is kind of that red line in the sand, where we, if this starts to deteriorate, then we really do have to go back to basics and rebuild that trust and that psychological safety for staff, and remember that we're using feedback as a tool for development. And earlier this year, why we're here to talk about listening and acting is because we released our latest best practice guide, Listening and Acting in Schools. And this guide features best practice case studies from our 2024-2025 award winners, including the cohort from the TEDRAG and Jen's school. And these winners were the ones that were the highest above the national benchmark for our data set in the question, how often do you see feedback to your leadership having an impact? And what we wanted to do with this guide is to find out what listening practices and mindsets are at work in these schools that we see such results in this action stage. And overall, these schools had truly wonderful examples of how they're working as a listening system. And I'm really excited that we have both Lisa and Jen here today to talk about this as a system. And when we were analyzing kind of the overarching themes that were appearing from these case studies, there were three that were very apparent in successfully bringing feedback to action. Those were power dynamics. So thinking about how we are being collaborative with the people that we're working with, including them on that journey, co-constructing the solutions that we want to see and giving them ownership about those. Visibility of impact. So making sure that those quick wins are being shown and being fed back and communicated to our staff, especially when it comes to workload changes or physical environment. And finally, prioritization. I think there's that urgency that is linked to morale and well-being, and that we have to be really honest as leaders that this is an important link that we have to remember to act on. So this guide is we'll see a look into what was written in this guide with some of these examples that Jen and Lisa will share with us today. Like I said, Jen is one of the Staff Feedback Award winners, and I'm very happy, Jen, that you are joining us here today. Over to you, your mic to tell your story.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I think really like fundamentally, the reason why we scored highly on that is because it's not just like a system or like particular things that we do or moments in time to listen to staff. It really is like it's like it is a mindset, like you use that word, like it's a mindset. So we care as much about our staff loving to come to work as we do about our students loving to come to school, and they're the same thing. So I think if you really believe that, and it's written on our wall as part of our mission, then listening isn't just an initiative, it's what you do to make sure that happens every day. And I think I am very deliberate, and my leadership team are very deliberate in that kind of, like, I always call it like ear to the rail type leadership. So I think as there's always a temptation as you kind of get higher into senior leadership to remove yourself from the staff, because obviously your job becomes so different. So you're teaching less, and you're doing a different job to what you probably were when you started. And I think there can be that perception, and like you said, it like the senior leaders don't understand what my job is, that they're not teaching this much. And so we deliberately make sure that we don't have lots of meetings, and we don't have most of my senior leadership team don't have offices, and that is so that we can be out with the staff all day, and making sure that we really do like deeply understand what it is that they are doing each day, and therefore it creates this really open culture. So like I don't have like a PA or somebody in staff don't need to book in a meeting with me to talk to me. Like they'll just bump into me in the corridor, and then that creates this open culture where you can just speak to people. Oh, Jen, have you got 5 minutes? Yes, of course I do. And it's not like then it's not an event that like I'm only going to read the staff survey. Well, the staff survey is important for like of course lots of reasons. Not everyone happens to bump into me on the corridor, and you want to make sure the surveys are really important for that kind of equity. But fundamentally it's just about being really open, but not just saying you're open, but actually like designing your day around making sure that happens. Every single day being out in lessons, out in the corridor, as you pass a workroom, popping in, saying hello to everybody. And then it's just being present and like not making sure that you are there and around people. And when you link that with like a genuine care and compassion for your staff, then listening just becomes a habit. It's not something that happens separately to that. But then at the same time, I think I spoke in the guide about this year in particular. I was quite pleased actually to win this award, because at MAP we've had like a massive change this year. So where we've moved the whole school, so instead of having like an English corridor or a maths corridor, we've changed to having small year group hubs. So like what was the humanities corridor is now the year 7 hub, where the children are taught English, maths, humanities and languages. We moved from 5 lessons a day to 3 lessons a day. So really big significant changes we put in place this year, and that required more than just that kind of I'm just going to walk around and talk to people. That was required like really intentional and deliberate listening. So, you know, when I did that, made that change, well, before I'd even decided fully to make the change, you know, meeting with different groups of staff who it would impact, you know, particularly in this case, the subject leaders, you know, what are their opinions on it, and like forming that before I even set out the intention. And then following, when I told all the staff, I met with every single member of staff in the school to talk about the impact these changes would have on them, obviously in groups. But every single member of the staff had time with me to talk through what they thought might be challenging about it, what the positives were. And, you know, I came up with a big list, and then, you know, went away and thought about what we can do to, you know, allay any of those concerns. And then in September, when we made the changes, we had like a live snagging list that, you know, is just open for any member of staff to add to. And the senior leadership team met every single day to review that snagging list in the early weeks. So then we were able to very quickly go, oh yeah, let's just change that. So an example of that was, you know, just a small thing around whiteboard pens. And because in our system now, it means that there's probably like 3 people sharing a classroom. There's obviously the teachers in their busyness, you know, put it in their pocket and then they leave, and then the pen for the board is gone. And, you know, that was just something that just came up, and it was like, well, we just need to buy everyone individual pens and label it so it's not the classroom's pen, it's the teacher's pen. But, you know, so you can just and that was just a really quick easy win, that it was like, staff have noticed that this is an issue, well, let's fix it on that day. And there's no, you know, waiting and you know, having to analyze anything around that. It's just like, let's just make the change.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I want to maybe reference some of the things that I said in the previous slides about that capability, agency, and protection, specifically for you as the school leader at Marine Academy. How is that working with the trust leadership? How are you supported to act well on the things that you hear, on the feedback that you get from the survey? How do you feel that capability, agency, protection helps you do a better job in the way that you're doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's exactly the same as like what I said. Like, I know that we're all working for the same purpose. Like, staff loving to come to work isn't just on the Marine Academy mission, it's the Trust's mission. So, like, you know, I know that what makes my staff love to come to work might be slightly different to another school. And I think TEDRAG, you know, we always speak about having a healthy balance, and that healthy balance between, you know, the kind of core consistencies and the school autonomy is just so right. So, like, I have total agency to be able to say, like, you know, this is what my staff needs to, you know, to achieve that love for coming to work. And there's never any you know, I never have to go anywhere to, you know, to make those decisions that are right for my staff or my students. So yeah, I feel that there's the total agency, and the protection comes from living the same values and having the same values in the same way that I've spoken about in my school. Like, my staff feel that they have that safety to be able to talk to me, because we're all in it for the same reason. We have a really strong sense of mission and purpose, and that goes up the same to trust level.
Great. And then final.
Amanda, can I just jump in from just in terms of that kind of protection point? We do have working parties for so we do all 3 surveys, and we have a working party for each survey, and that working party is made up of trust leaders like me and head teachers, because it's so important, I think, to get head teachers involved in supporting the process of each of those surveys, because it is their survey. I know it's a trust survey as well, but essentially it is their survey, and I want all the heads to feel involved in that.
Great. Jen, last question before we hand it over to Lisa. Maybe you can share an example about when you have made some sort of change based on some sort of feedback, and it hasn't gone to plan, and you've had to maybe manage that recourse with your staff. I think you mentioned
Yeah.
that in your case
Yeah, I
study.
did. Yeah. So we kind of knew a couple of years ago that staff were really struggling with behavior, and like, they were really having to work incredibly hard to ensure the children were behaving like harder than what you would want them to. And so we'd heard that feedback, and we knew that we needed to make a change based on that. But the change we decided on was the wrong change, and it actually made things worse. So, we changed the location of our lesson removal room, and it made it worse. And I remember I stood up in front of the whole staff, and I just apologized. I was like, look, I've heard what you've said, but actually the solution is the wrong one. And the behavior isn't your problem to fix, it's always a leadership problem to fix. And I've tried, but it's wrong, so I'm sorry, and we're gonna do something different this time. And I just think, yeah, having that vulnerability and like just admitting when you make mistakes is just really important, and just that I got that wrong. And we'll try something different. I think that is just as powerful as when you get it right sometimes, because it creates that safety, doesn't it? And that vulnerability of like, not everything is perfect, but we are doing our best for you.
Yeah. I think that example really shows that connection of the practices and the mindsets. We have to work on this together to see that improvement. And sometimes we just get it wrong. And that's where those mindsets really support that system and the way that you're doing things.
And but change, yeah, but I would just say but recognizing that quickly. You can't just say I've got it wrong, I've let it go on for ages. Just like quickly, it's like the urgency of it, I think, is an important piece as well. Like, people know here that things will change quickly if they need to. There's no like hanging around or waiting. It's like, oh, we got that wrong, let's fix it now. Let's fix it tomorrow, not wait.
Exactly. Wonderful. Thank you, Jen. Lisa, over to you to speak about how you're looking at bringing action on staff feedback across the trust.
Thank you. And Jen, I know you need to go quite soon, so if you disappear, feel free to disappear. Right, I just need to show my screen. Is that sharing?
Yep. Now just start your presentation. You should be good to go.
How's that? Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great. Good morning, everybody. I'm here to talk about, from a trust, Jen's talked so beautifully about how the surveys and the listening works in schools, and I wanted to talk to you really from a trust point of view, how we have developed our surveys and our feedback. So we have run Edurio staff surveys for 5 years, I think now, and we have learned a lot. So this might look quite polished, but it didn't look like this when we first started. But what we've learned particularly is that successful surveys are based on the confidence that staff have that their views will be listened to, understood, and acted upon. I think without that confidence, you just don't get the participation rate. So I wanted to share today just some principles that we work to that have really helped us achieve both consistently high participation rates in our schools and across our trust, but more importantly, how we turn our staff survey results into action. So for me, feedback really only matters if people participate. For feedback to be effective, we really need the confidence that we're hearing from enough people. If your participation rate isn't big enough, you're not getting a full view of what staff really feel. So high completion rates really are something that we really do focus on to make sure we get a true representation of staff views. So to ensure we can hear from as many voices as possible, our first step is to provide a timeline each year for our schools so they're really clear about the stages, the dates, and the steps in our survey process. As I said, we've developed these over a number of years, and we hope that we've got to a point now where most people know exactly those stages that we go through. But for me, the most important stages actually happen after the survey. If staff take the time to provide feedback, but they never hear back about what the results were and any actions taken, the participation rate really will fall because people will lose confidence in the survey. So it's really important that we get the after survey bit right. And the two main questions really that we ask ourselves when we get the survey results are, firstly, what do staff tell us? Obviously, we can get that from the results from the Endurio platform. But also then, what are we going to do about it? So then we narrate. In terms of participation rates, we narrate and over-narrate to our heads the importance of the survey and the why. I think it is now so embedded across the trust, being in our 5th year, that most head teachers do get it, but we continue to over-narrate why it is so important. We provide them with a number of tools. We provide them with planning documents so they can plan how they're going to launch the survey in their school. It will be different for each school context, and how they're going to maximise completion rates in their own settings. And again, that will be different in a primary school to a secondary school to an all-through school. So they absolutely have the agency to decide how they're going to do that themselves. If I'm honest, we also introduce a bit of friendly competition between our heads because we have lovely competitive heads. So we often do league tables and countdowns to the end of the survey, which works really well. And our completion rate has risen from 54% in our first year, when I guess staff didn't necessarily have the confidence in the process, to 89% we got this year, which I'm really pleased with. So to ensure that we are feeding back to our staff, we need to make sure that our heads can engage with the results really easily. So, like me, some heads will dive straight into the Endurio platform and lose many years of their lives looking at the data. It is very enjoyable. But lots of them don't have time to go into that kind of detail. And so we provide them with templates, giving them summaries of their main results from their surveys. So their 3 highest questions, their 3 lowest questions, and the historical data trend and benchmark data against that. And it's really easy then to see where your work-ons may be. This year we introduced something that's been really effective, which is the 3 biggest movers in the survey. Obviously, you've had to have previous surveys to be able to do that. But actually, that's either whether a question has really gone up a lot, or whether a question has really fallen a lot. And that really gives a good indication of how staff are feeling in that school in that year. And it really helps our head teachers focus on what is going well and where they can improve. We've also, you'll see that we call it our advantage. We have our advantage, which is our key KPIs for our trust. And we have them for each school as well. And they are essentially all based predominantly on survey results. So one of our key indicators in our advantage, which everybody is aware of, it is the main measure that the trustees look at. And so one of our key indicators is how likely are you to recommend your school as a good place to work? And it's really powerful, I think, for staff to know that that is something that is critically engaged with, not only just at school level, but all the way up to trustee level. And I think by giving the staff feedback that level of visibility and importance, we really reinforce the message that our staff experience really matters. We actually do really want staff to love coming to work. And those results are not viewed in isolation. They're reviewed as a whole in terms of our organisational health. And we match that with our kids love coming to school, and our communities love working with us. So it's a whole holistic view, but staff is key in that. So once we've understood the data, we've got a number of tools that we provide to schools to support them to then work on what's next. So we have staff action plan. So each school will have a staff survey action plan that they work on based on their own individual results each year. Along with the data templates, it's quite easy for them to identify the areas that they really can celebrate, along with the ones that maybe are their next steps to work on. We provide the schools with You Said We Did templates to help them articulate that to their staff. And we also provide a lot of guidance about what to do in different circumstances. So if the issue is well understood, and maybe the school knew that was kind of coming, and they may just want to inform staff in a staff bulletin that they've heard it and this is what they're going to do. But there are some results sometimes where the results are mixed or sensitive, where they may want to delve deeper, and then we give some guidance on how to hold targeted listening sessions. We also, and I think this is really important, we celebrate our results both across the trust and give the schools templates to be able to celebrate their successes too, because I think as well as feeding back to staff, I think it's really important, going back to the employee value proposition, to actually share that wider. If you're getting great staff results, it is a brilliant recruitment tool. So we give them lots of tools and templates to be able to do that, both in their own individual context, but we also do it across as a trust. And so for me, my final thought is that data should start the conversation, but shouldn't end it. Schools analyse their own results. We also analyse the results on a trust-wide basis and devise a trust-wide action plan. And this year, our results showed that while still above national, our results around workload have remained static actually since we've been doing the survey. They haven't really moved at all. And so although they're not really poor results, we decided that we really needed to delve further into these results and listen. So thank you to Amanta. We have partnered with Agirio, and we're devising at the moment, and we'll be delivering staff listening sessions next year, led by myself and our Chief Executive, Moira. And I think it's really important to get Moira involved. I think it's really important for staff to see how seriously this is being taken. And it's really a chance to really understand what is behind the data, because I think the data only tells you a bit of the story. And until you talk to staff and really delve deep, it's difficult to understand it. And it will be different in the different contexts. But we are going to go to every single school and hear what staff have to say. So to sum up, for me, to turn feedback into real change, we use the following principles. Feedback only matters if people participate. It's really important to get your participation rate as high as possible. The most important stages happen after the survey, because that is when staff are going to know they're listened to, and data should start the conversation rather than end it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Lisa, for that overview. When I first saw that KPI board that you're using for your schools, I was very inspired. I think that is exactly how you can use survey data in a way that is both reflective and forward thinking. I think setting those really ambitious goals for your school heads to grow and to say, okay, these are the things that are most important to us. This is how we want to see that progress, and in such a structured way that both simplifies it but also amplifies what's important to you as a trust. I think it's
a really helpful articulation for us, because we do all three surveys to show the health of both the schools and the trust as a whole. And I think we do use it, and we do our schools to predict what they want to get kind of next year in terms of those advantage key KPIs. But it is done with very low stakes. I think, Jen, would you agree with me? Like, if you don't reach your prediction, that nothing's going to happen, but it's to try and help us get better and better and think of ways to do that.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think that by setting those very clear KPIs, that is, I think it was Tamsin who said, these are the things that we think are are critical to education, no matter what government, no matter what happens with AI. These are our core principles that we want to adhere to, and if we do that well, we think that we'll be giving a good education to people.
I think all the stuff that goes on in the background, regardless of what it is and who's the Prime Minister and whatever, those are the key things, regardless of background noise, that we will know if our schools and trusts are doing what we want them to do.
Exactly. We have some time left in this session, and I would like to open it up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to add in the chat, or to just raise your hand and come off mic and ask it to Jen or to Lisa about, or to myself, about what you've heard here today? I have some questions ready if the audience doesn't have any, but I think if any participants want to speak up. One just came on. I wonder if you've done any analysis about EDI factors.
So that is a good question. In terms of the survey, we do analyze, because we do have the demographic questions. So we can analyze around different groups of staff, both in terms of role and ethnicity and gender, and all the demographics that we've got. So we do some analysis around that. It's not always, it doesn't necessarily, I think role is probably the one that tells us the most when we analyse against role. Our gender split is, I think, typical of most schools. So certainly the primaries are more female heavy. So I think it doesn't, you can't see it. We do look, but we don't see any meaningful trends at this point, but we will continue to look every year.
Yeah, I think also at a national level, we see that the gender split is usually pretty even, especially around these kind of respect and the same feedback, having an impact questions are more or less people, feel the same, with some of those people identifying as other genders having that lower experience, but from our perspective, our data set is quite small in those categories, so it's hard.
And that's where we struggle, I think, because our data set becomes really small.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? All right. Well, then I have a question. I really want to, while we still have you, Jen, kind of talk about that, closing the gap of confidence that we saw in that national data between senior leaders and other staff groups. And I'd like maybe for you to start. How do you think that is lived? You spoke a little bit about it when you said that, people get a promotion and then they kind of forget where they've come from, and how do you keep that connection alive, and how do you make sure that gap is as small as possible? And then Lisa, you can answer the same.
So what I think I keep coming to these like leadership phrases, but is it called like stacking the chairs? I think there's like a phrase where, like, you as senior leaders, we, making sure we do every job in the school, like, the dining hall needs to be cleared for open evening, like we will stack the chairs, like we will, do cover lessons, we will do go and do invigilation, do you know what I mean? So like making sure that, like, as a team, we are actively doing those roles, where they are required, I think is a big part of that. So that's about like trying to make sure you deeply understand, every role in the school. We do a lot of shadowing of roles, for a day, particularly if a senior leader is new in post. One of the first things I ask them to do is to shadow, for a day or a week, like the people who you're going to be most closely leading. So, that's one of the things I did when I first took on the headship. on attendance as one of our biggest challenges. I just went and sat with the attendance team for like 3 days and just watched what they did, and went out with them on home visits, and really trying to like understand the roles that they're doing. So I think it's like about that mindset of doing it rather than like having one. I don't want to sound like I'm like saying the surveys aren't important, because they are really important, obviously. But it's about more, and what I'm trying to say is it's about more than those like touch points. It's about just living it every day.
Lisa, any comments?
No, I agree with Jen, and Jen is an absolute queen at doing these things, because she doesn't just genuinely listen, she genuinely wants to listen. And I think that is a key difference, is that listening isn't just looking like you're listening. Jen actually wants to listen because she wants to hear, and she wants to know the answers, and she wants to make it better. So it's about listening, I think, with intention. Would you agree, Jen?
Yeah, I think so. And I think to go back to the surveys, and why I will say like they are so useful, is because as much as you do that, in a large organization, there's always people who you might miss. And I think, the surveys are so important because, as much as I think all of the staff are comfortable talking to me, a new member of staff comes in, doesn't know me very well, how making sure that their voice is heard, because maybe they're not at the point where they are comfortable just to come knock on my door, or to bump into me in the corridor. So I think I really value the surveys for the voices that that you might miss if they are if you're just relying on the things that I'm talking about, which are great for creating the culture and making sure that everyone feels comfortable to have their voice heard. But the surveys, I think, are so important in I said it before, but it's equity. It's making sure that everyone has that chance to get their views across. And making, then like Lisa said, just making the time to just read every single comment, and taking every single one seriously.
To bring it back to kind of that action stage, how do both of you approach the idea that everyone wants their problem to be fixed, but not all problems can be fixed, or have a solution, or have the budgets or the resources? How do you prepare for those kind of conversations when you have to say back to your staff that this cannot be done?
So I think it's a combination, Jen, and please jump in, but I think our data templates that we send out to heads really make it clear what is the biggest issue for staff, and what are the biggest celebration points for staff. And it's up to the head, it's their context, it's their school to decide which ones they can and can't tackle. And actually, if there is something that is just beyond the realms, then I'm assuming, Jen, that our heads would actually just say that to staff. Because if staff want an extra building, like that's because I haven't got enough space, that's going to be a no. And we would just say, look, this is the why. I think the really important thing is the why. Yes, we'd all love a new building, but this is why. Sorry, that was an extreme example. I'm sure there are more, but I don't think it's good practice to just ignore that. So if there is a big feeling about something that we know that we cannot fix, I just don't think you can ignore it. And you could say that is workload. I mean, I don't know what the listening sessions will hold for us, but I don't know if we'll come up with solutions where we can fix it and all our staff feel like they are not overworked. But what we can do is listen and hear and see if there's anything we can do.
I think that that's interesting, because I think there's a solution to every problem, Lisa.
Jen, well, I love your can-do attitude. I look forward to seeing a new building.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because I think what the kind of one of the big parts of our culture here is like innovation. So I think, okay, so people have said, I want a new building. Well, we can't have a new building, but maybe what we can do instead is a different way to solve the problem. So I think you can, and I think that is where you can also get lots of other people involved, and talking to lots of staff around like, no, well, we can't do this, but what can we do instead to make this thing better? So I think that that's the approach we have to that. And again, it's just about honest communication, isn't it? Like, I've heard you and I understand that this is a problem. This is what we can do right now. This is what we might be able to do in future, or actually at this point, we're going to be doing this thing. So it's just the openness. But I do think there is something in, even if you're not doing the exact thing that the staff have asked for, you are like really strategically looking at the problem and like thinking outside the box to find other ways of solving it. Like, people were working too hard to, for behaviour at my school. Actually, what would we do? Well, we changed the whole school system to fix that. So I don't think there's anything too big you can do if you really want that solution.
You also had a good example about moving the tea cart, to bringing the tea cart to the school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's just like, can you just like, it's just asking a different question, isn't it? Like, what are all the different possible solutions to this? Like, or like working backwards from the thing that staff really, really want. If I want 100% of staff to feel like this, well, how can I work backwards to get there? Not like, what could I tweak or change now?
I also think the listening is important, because actually what the survey results might say will be a top level view. So if I don't know why I went for this example. If the survey results say that everyone wants a new building, actually without talking to people, you won't know that's their solution. That's not their issue. Their issue is they need more space. So then you can start thinking about different solutions.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We are out of time. Thank you, Lisa and Jen, so much for joining me today in this session. I think ending it on that point of there's a solution for everything. It's just being creative about it is absolutely wonderful. People want to be validated, and people want to see that their thoughts and their feedback have been taken into account, and that the actions are thought through and given, and that leaders have given their all to look for all the possible solutions. So thank you very much for your stories, for sharing with us today. And we are now off to a longer break. We will now return back to this link at 12 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye.